There is something stressful about talking about homeschooling educational philosophies. Do you know what I mean? Do you find it a little bit agitating? I know for me, when the subject of unschooling comes up, or classical education, or Charlotte Mason, I just feel like this little internal catch inside, like, am I gonna have to defend myself? Is somebody going to bring up some way I haven't complied to the vision of this educational philosophy, and now I'm gonna be put on the defensive and feel like I'm not doing it well enough? How many of you have felt this way in any of the academic homeschooling communities you've been a part of? Oh, I see. Oh, yes. Ha, 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 yes. It's weird, isn't it? We're like gathered to support each other, then we take the risk of sharing, and then all of a sudden we get feedback about how we're not doing it right. Do you know that feeling? Yes. In fact, the Sixth Stephen says, I never feel like I'm doing it right. I just want us to pause just for a moment and think about that. How can a community be supportive if the persistent feeling you're having is that you're not living up to the imagined standards of that community? How does that feel? Yeah, some people say it feeds their self-doubt. Someone else says that it's really hard if you have a kid with ADD or special needs. One mom says, I have come to the point where I won't argue anymore. My way is the right way for me. Another mom says it's isolating. And yet here's the thing. We want support and community. We go into those visions, those groups, with a desire to learn. Does that remind you of anyone? You've got kids. They want to learn because, as we've already established in my talks on brain-based learning, it's natural to learn. Our kids come to us open-hearted, eager to learn and grow, wanting our support and validation. We want to create a context where that can happen for them. And unfortunately, sometimes the modeling we're getting from these homeschool groups we're a part of is that you have to hit a standard before you get to be long in the community. So think about your own children now and how you might actually be bringing some of that energy into your home. Maybe you are holding your own children to a standard based on this group you're a part of, and now they're having the trickle-down experience that you had. How many of you can maybe relate to that a little bit? Anyone? I'd really welcome feedback today because I have to be honest, I'm nervous about this topic. It's not because I don't want to talk about it. It's that it's so volatile. There's so much emotion around homeschooling philosophies. Look at this. People are now weighing in. Tons. Yes, I do. I feel that way when the subject comes up and we're not even homeschooling anymore with grown kids. Wow. Wow. Even with grown kids. Yes, this has been my hardest struggle in homeschool, says Angela. So this is like what I would call the underbelly of homeschooling. The stuff we don't really talk about. We don't really admit our own distress, our hunger for community, and what we need in order to take the risks necessary to be effective home educators. So let's talk about this. Yeah, some people say they homeschooled and they've given up homeschooling over this issue. It's like, I give up. I've tried everything. I don't know how to be that person I'm supposed to be for my kids. Yeah, charter schools, they can make you feel like you're never doing enough. So let's start out with unschooling, and I'll tell you why I want to start there. Because unschooling sounds like magic, doesn't it? It's like if I could get the principles right, I would develop these natural learners, these kids who are just self-directed, self-motivated, waking up in the morning with bright eyes, ready to take in the world. And all the while, they'd be mastering math facts without a single workbook. They would suddenly read literature and it would transform their writing without any edits, without any help from me. How many people sort of have that feeling around unschooling? You know, you put on the television and they watch all day and yet they're still ready for college, right? Video games, I shouldn't be worried about video games because unschoolers aren't. And if I just let him play on the, video game all day long, won't he be getting the education if I just trust this philosophical point of view? This is what happens to all of us. We are seduced by what I call ideology. Now, I'm going to read you, I was going to read you a definition. Let's see, I think I've got it over here. I have a bulletin board today. You should see it. In fact, I'm just going to show it to you really quick so you can see what today looks like. That's what we're trying to tackle today. And if we don't get through it in one session, we'll just do part 2 on Monday. So don't freak out. So here is the dictionary definition of ideology. It's a body of ideas reflecting the social needs and aspirations of an individual or a group. I'm going to read it one more time. Ideology is the body of ideas reflecting the social needs and aspirations of an individual or a group. Why is it important for us to understand that? Well, here's the second definition. Ideology is a comprehensive, normative vision or set of standards. So here's what ideology means in homeschool. When we adopt a particular style of homeschool, we are seduced into what I would call ideological purity. That means we hear the principles, we hear the ideals, and then we believe that the only way we will get the benefit is if we adopt it perfectly. How many of you know that feeling? So here you are. You come into a homeschool discussion group, and this totally happened to me. I'm going to tell you my little unschooling experience in a minute. You come in, you're wide-eyed, you are seduced and attracted in the best way to the vision of unschooling, this idea that learning should be natural. And we've already established that learning happens naturally. We did that last week. So you know already that learning should naturally happen. So you come in and you're hungry for ideas. You don't know how it should look. So you take the risk, you write your post, and what do you get back? Well, if you don't know the vocabulary yet, you might get back a breakdown of all the ways you communicated your needs that don't match the vocabulary of the group. Do you know what I'm talking about? So you say something and you didn't know that this word is sort of like not the right language about unschooling or not the right language about classical education. And what you get back is some kind of deconstruction of your little emotional risk that you just tried. That is the most disheartening experience ever. It'll be like a knife to your heart. By the way, this is just a little freebie. Everything I'm saying to you right now about your experience in these communities is what your children feel when you download an ideology on them and when they take the risk to share their truth. So I want you to do both. I want you to stay connected to what I'm saying for you and then just file away how it looks when you do it to your kids, because we've just had all this modeled to us. We're just copying what we've seen, okay? So this happens over and over again. And in some contexts, it's really popular. It's like the strategy for how to help you become this effective person. So here's what ideological purity is. Okay, I have it in a big red circle with a line through it because ideological purity is impossible. And I'm going to explain why. But here's what happens. People who really believe in a philosophy of living, whether it's home education or religion or a family system or a way to raise children who will always obey. When you believe in a system first, you forget about the human beings in the system. You end up favoring the system over the human beings. And what happens is, to protect this radical perspective, whatever that perspective is, we have to get rid of the people who can't live up to it fully. We start to believe that the principles are perfect. And when human beings fail to execute those principles, it's the human being's fault, not the principles. If you could just do the principles, you'd be fine, right? But the truth of the matter is, no human being can live up to any system perfectly. And in fact, unschooling is a philosophy. It's not a principle. It's not a set of practices. It's a point of view. And a point of view adopted by human beings has lots of expressions, as many expressions as there are people. We're going to look at now why ideological purity is dangerous and why it doesn't work, okay? So, and I just want to throw in this little caveat. If you are ever in a homeschooling space that shames you for risking your personal experience, it's not a safe space. If you are ever in a homeschooling context that shames you for risking your personal experience, it is not a safe space. It's okay to have ideas challenged, but it should be done in a way that takes into account your emotional well-being. This is really, really important. People don't grow through threat. Remember? We saw that back when we did brain-based learning. Your kids won't learn if you threaten them. Guess what? You won't learn if you feel threatened. So the moment you feel that squishiness, you have my permission. Click out. Okay? So here's the reason that we cannot follow an ideological system perfectly. And this is true for every kind of home education, every one of them, okay? It's because human beings and families are complex systems. No two are alike. What do I mean by a complex system? Let me get my other note card. All right. So there are three kinds of aspects to being a complex system that I want to talk about. And I'm just going to say this again. If you like what I'm sharing, please tap the screen to give me hearts. And if you want your friends to hear this scope and you haven't shared it yet, now's a good time to do that, okay? So just a reminder, I'm Julie Bogart. I'm from Brave Writer, the online writing and language arts program. Thank you for the hearts, you guys. I really appreciate it. We hit 80,000 hearts in just a couple weeks. I'm so blown away. So this is very fun for me. The hearts mean nothing. I just enjoy seeing them. So thank you. Okay. So where do we leave off? This is where we are. Human beings and families are complex systems. Okay? We looked last week at brain research, and we know that the brain is a living system. It has many portals for learning. It doesn't have just one. There isn't just one way to grow and learn. There are lots of ways to grow and learn. But what we do know right out of the gate is that learning doesn't happen without safety, without the ability to take risks. And those need to be in partnership with supportive people. So if you want to grow in any of the philosophies we talk about today, you need to find people who are supportive of you while you're in process. Okay? That's rule number one. Absolutely, you need a safe zone to grow. You cannot grow. You might feel challenged. Some of that confrontational stuff might actually catalyze new thinking. It did for me. I experienced it. But at a certain point, here's what happens. You might receive it and self-examine, receive it and self-examine, and then one day it'll go one step too far and you will shut down. You'll feel like you can't present yourself again, or they touched your most sacred issue and now you feel exposed and raw, right? So this is what you have to remember. If you are going to take an academic risk or an emotional risk, you need a supportive community to receive it while you are being challenged. And this is the same for your kids. This is a meta talk. It works on both levels. All right. The second point about us being complex systems is this. Social science shows us that each person is socially located. What does that mean? It means you come from a culture. You have an age. You have a race. You have a region of the country or the world. You have a native language. You have an economic framework. So if I were to explain my social location to you, I would say this. I'm a 53-year-old white woman raised in Southern California with an advanced degree who earns middle-class wages, right? That's what I would say. And that actually has an impact on how I perceive the world. Not only that, my parents are divorced, and I'm divorced. Some of you might not know that. Those have a real impact on what I'm doing in my home with my children, how those principles actually apply to the education I'm giving my kids. So what might work for one family and it seems seamless, in the hands of somebody else might come out completely different. your tone of voice, your expectations, the relationship you have with your spouse, a child who's been violated or hurt or dealing with a learning disadvantage. These have a real impact on your application of any principle that you attempt to adopt. And that's the way it is for everyone. There is no one right way because there is no one right human. So, what's the third piece to this complex system? Well, psychology tells us that we are in process at all times. We are not static human beings. We are changing. We are growing. We are adapting. So what we understood in our 20s is different than what we understand in our 30s. And what we understand in our 30s is different than what we understand in our 40s. The same language that came to you in your 30s and you tried to apply it, maybe if you waited till you were 40 would suddenly look different. Here's what I want you to take away from this part of the talk about being a complex system. Not only are all of these issues true about you, they're true about your kids. They're true about your husband or wife if you're the male who's homeschooling. And that family system impacts any practice you attempt. And if we don't have self-knowledge, or let's say you're sitting on a time bomb of an emotional, explosive issue in your personal internal self, the way you interpret some of the principles that you receive through any of these philosophies may be jerked, yanked in a direction that really makes it not practicable for you. Does that make sense? Okay, we're going to keep going because I feel like I'm getting a little theoretical for some of you. But I'm hoping that this is resonating. How are we doing? Anyone have a question on this portion before I move on to what I call the red flags? I will vamp for a moment while you think of questions, but I'm happy to take them right now. So the basic principle so far is that ideological purity is dangerous. And the reason we cannot adopt an ideology perfectly is because we are complex systems as individuals and as family units. Oh yes, how do we deal with ideologically pure friends? You just have them over for tea and go shopping. You know, one of the hardest parts is that when you have people who are attached to an ideology, they're doing it because they're fearful. It's this desire to not wind up like everybody that they're afraid of. You know, I'm going to get to this, develop our own principles for our own home. That's coming. So let me talk about this for a minute, because this was a good question about the ideological pure friends. So when you're young, I call the 30s the decade of I'm going to do it better than my parents, right? This is when we decide we can grab onto a system and it'll turn out better. You know, I won't get divorced. My kids won't rebel. I will wind up with academic, happy children who love me and love their dad, and our whole family gets along. We're going to do it. We've found the system that's going to make that happen. And then the 40s come, and, well, how many of you are in your 40s? You know what happens. It doesn't quite work out that way. Suddenly, these free radicals, called the human beings in your family and life, don't play by your rules. And you wind up recognizing, oh, so I'm not protected just by pulling this shield over my head of these principles? Yes, you guys are understanding. You know what I'm talking about. So here's the thing. No one is contagious, right? Your friends who've been through shipwreck, be their best friend because they know some truth. Always look on these lists, like if you're in an email list. If you see that the leaders of the group have never shared a homeschool struggle or a shift in their ideology, if they've been doing it perfectly since their kids were 6, then they're not telling you the truth. And I like being around people who've been through something because that's how we grow. So that's the goal. So if you have these ideologically pure friends, be friends with them, but go find some other people to bare your soul to. Don't bare your soul to unsafe people who haven't earned the right to hear your truth. Okay? So we're going to move on now. Thank you. Those were good comments. And this is a hard, hard subject. All right. So here's the thing. Unschooling appeals to us because it's like, a better than Jesus education. It's like magical. It's going to turn out the way that you always imagined it would. So we get sucked into this like effortless, obvious utopian education for our kids. And so here's my story. I told you before that when Noah was in 4th grade and I had these ship-shape, perfectly laid out planners with highlighters and lots of little decorations, and I used to write them personal notes at the start of each week in their planner that said things like, I'm so excited that we're going to learn about fractions this week. And then next to where it was the copywork thing, I'd say, oh, you're going to love the passage I picked from E.B. White. It's like all this little cheerleading stuff through the page. And then when they would finish their little assignments, they got to put a sticker. And I just felt like it was the perfect marriage, right, between structure and nurturing and giving them the best of myself. And after we did this, for a couple of months, Noah woke up one morning and I went to get him out of bed and he said, I hate my life. And I was in shock. I thought things were going well. I felt good about homeschool. I felt like we were on task. So what I did is I received his communication. I didn't argue with him. I didn't tell him he wasn't allowed to feel that way. I didn't see it as willful rebellion. We had a conversation. I had to find out. And he was young, he was 10. How articulate is a 10-year-old boy about what's going on the inside of him? But what I was able to discover is that he felt like he had nothing to look forward to each day. It was so planned out and so structured that he did not feel like his life was interesting to him. Now, Johanna, his younger sister, she loved the planner. That was totally up her alley. She liked the colored markers, picking out the sticker, knowing exactly what to get done by the end of the day. So that worked for her. But for Noah, that didn't work. So as I shared before, I had some help. Someone gave me some articles on brain-based research, which helped me sort of take a step towards what eventually would have been an unschooling perspective. But I didn't have that language back then. And so what we did is we shifted how we did homeschool for Noah. And it was magical, actually. And a lot of what I share in Brave Writer comes from my breakthroughs of paying attention to that child in that moment. Party School was developed through that, and I'll do a scope on that next week. Our ability to go deep diving and ignore other subjects for a period of time came from that experience. Allowing their dad to have a much more active role at that time in his involvement, that was from that experience. So that was a really good experience for me initially with unschooling. Then we moved from California. Oops, who's this guy? Okay, I got rid of him. Sorry about that. Another one. Sorry, I've blocked the people. My gosh, we're getting a whole flood of bad people. Sorry about that, you guys. Anyway, so we had this experience together of an unschooling journey, but I didn't know that's what it was called. At the time, we moved to Ohio from California. And what happened then is we went back to our normal experiences of, doing school, but it had this sort of unschooly flavor. And then I heard about Charlotte Mason. Now, Charlotte Mason, for me, still is one of the healthier homeschool educational philosophies out there, and let me tell you why. First of all, she has a 6-volume series that you can read that is as rambly as it could possibly be. It is not as organized as you might want it to be. So what that means is you get to look through her works, this body of work, and let it digest slowly. You get to decide which parts resonate and which parts do not resonate. Okay, so that's one of the reasons I like Charlotte. I also like her regard for the person. She's so fitted in her focus on the integrity of the learner and just how special that child really is and how much support they require. Yes, I'm getting to, Rebecca mentions there are CM purists. I'm getting there. And I also like the integration of a lifestyle. Yes, for me, Charlotte Mason revitalized my homeschool too. That's what another one of our moms is saying. That's what it did for me too. And then I was around moms who suddenly thought the only books worth reading were from like the 19th century. They were distrusting of advances in technology. And I found myself running up against what Rebecca said, the CM purist, a kind of philosophy that romanticized the old world and was suspicious of the modern world. And that didn't make sense to me. I was all about the modern world. We kept going. And what I noticed with Noah, who enjoyed Charlotte Mason to a degree, my other kids did a lot, he still kept running into this like moment where my traditional approach, sitting at a table, using a pencil, that was a lot of what we did, was not fitted for him. And it was at that time that I was really exposed in a big way to unschooling. And of course, I joined the list, and you all know which one I mean. And there was this moment, and I benefited hugely. I learned a lot by reading and listening and risking participation. Here's what happened for me. I didn't fully understand the dynamic of growth that needed to happen in our family dynamic to be able to support something as hands-off as unschooling. Even though I know that the models in that movement have been very invested in their children and very active, I felt like I didn't know what that looked like. How many of you know what I mean? It's like I could read the principles, but I needed handholds. I wasn't exactly sure how I could implement. I wanted someone to explain to me, like, what does it look like in my day? And then on top of it, I started feeling what I call curriculum shame. Like if the program I was using was actually called a curriculum, it was no longer valid. It had no merit, nothing I could learn from it. That didn't make sense to me. I mean, it's true that some workbooks shut down learning, but there are some educators who've created valuable tools that taught me things about learning that I didn't know. I came into home education not an educator. I came in as a parent, as a breastfeeder, as a nurturer. I was very willing. I was in therapy. I was very willing to be self-aware and to grow. But I didn't know what it looked like on a day-to-day basis. So here's one of the crazier things that we did. I got to this point where I realized, okay, I'm just going to jump in with both feet because maybe the problem is I'm not applying all the principles, right? So I talked about it with my husband at the time, and he agreed. So we took the kids out for breakfast, literally, went to a pancake house, 5 kids, and we announced, we are embarking on this new educational principle called unschooling. And we explained what it was. And out of the 5 kids, 1 was too young to care. She wasn't even 6 yet. And the other 4, we were split. 2 were thrilled, Noah and Liam, and 2 were panicked, Johanna and Jacob. And here's the crazy thing about it. I couldn't even recognize their panic. I just sort of assumed that they would go through this really great deschooling process and suddenly be on board. It wasn't until later that I saw, even in these unschooling communities, that they talk about not just opening the floodgates, but taking it one little step at a time, letting go of control one little step at a time. That would have been a better solution for me. But here's what I want to share with you, and this is what we're into now, the red flags. So even though I loved the philosophy of unschooling, and I think my personality is conducive to the principles, implementation was a challenge. I didn't fully get it. And then I started reading the posts differently because now I was actually trying to do it. I wasn't just drawn to the fantasy, I was drawn to the reality. And that's when I came across the red flags. Now, this is not to say that I don't like unschooling or unschoolers because I benefited enormously from their vision. But there was a weird thing going on in my family when I started unschooling, and this is what it was. I just started graduate school for my master's. So here I was entering this highly structured program for me while I was removing all structure for my kids. And this is what was very strange. I loved grad school. I had been studying my master's thesis subject area for 10 years on my own. I had read every book I could find. I had followed all the advice of the people I respected, and I was stuck in a quagmire of questions. I entered grad school totally spent. I had read everything I could and still felt like I did not have the handles I was looking for. And so here's what happened. I ended up in grad school, and someone else was now helping me critically think about my thinking. And they were experts. They were giving me readings, assignments, class discussion, an encounter with other experts in the field, people I didn't know to read. And my education took off like a shot. All of that self-study I had done was fabulous. I don't regret a day of it. But that wasn't the only thing I needed. I needed someone else to help guide me. And so here's the first red flag. I remember a mother in that unschooling list that I was a part of sharing that her daughter was going to homeschool through college and maybe even do graduate school online. And the mom said this, you know, everything I've ever wanted to learn, I've learned from books, and it's a big waste of money to be in a university setting when you can teach yourself. And I thought, no, that's not true, because remember, we are complex systems. We can't see our own thinking. Sometimes we need an outside person to help us do the self-inquiry that creates the maximum growth. So unschooling creates space to grow on your own, to read, to study, but it doesn't necessarily help you know yourself all the time because you're in the family system all the time. You're like a fish in a fishbowl. And the way we grow the most is when we finally take the risk to encounter people who are different or have more information or can help us critically evaluate our own thinking. That's the role of some forms of education in school, and it's valid. Here's the second red flag for me. This is for me. I should have said this at the beginning. I'm just sharing my journey. Your mileage may and will vary. Okay. So here's the second red flag. I remember when someone was talking about her unschooled son that he was getting ready to go to college, to go to a junior college, but they wouldn't let him in unless he had a high school diploma or a GED. And of course, this student didn't have a high school diploma. He was homeschooled. So he was going to have to take the GED. And this was kind of a bigwig in the movement. And she said at the time that she reassured him that all he had to do was minimally pass this test. He wasn't good at algebra because they hadn't really studied it in a systematic way. So they hunkered down and they just studied for the algebra for that test so he could pass, so he could get into junior college. And for me personally, in our family, that didn't feel good. I thought, I'm not preparing my kids to be nervous about the GED. I don't want to treat the GED like, oh, it's this little hurdle to get over and we'll just barely get you over it and then you can sort of get into junior college. I didn't want that. I wanted my kids to have the opportunity, if they wanted it, to go to whatever college they wanted to go to. And I knew that if we unschooled math, for example, they weren't going to get there. We used tutors. We used the local public school. I felt like it was my responsibility to ensure that someone who was passionate about math and more qualified than me delivered that information to my kids while they were preparing themselves to take the SAT and the ACT. Now, not everyone feels this way. And for some people, the value of being a family and not having that stress during high school is bigger. But that wasn't true for us. And when I saw those two red flags, I took this big step back. And I simply said to myself, you know what? I get to decide for my family. I get to decide. You get to decide for your family. So here's where I want to go next. I want to give you what I consider 3 principles for a healthy education. Principles that you can adopt that don't have anything to do with an educational philosophy. Yeah, someone says unschooling also has fundamentalists. Fundamentalists are ideological purists. That's what they are. That's what it is in any system. And honestly, it's one of the things I'm afraid of in this venue. I don't want anyone to be a Julie Bogart purist. That is not my goal. I tell parents that all the time when they contact me. You don't have to use my stuff. I hope you critically evaluate if what we do works for you, because it's your homeschool and your complex system, and you have to figure it out, just like I did, okay? Yeah, well, we used public school. Someone said there are homeschool purists too. Absolutely. Some of my kids went to public high school. Some of them didn't. So I think there is value in a variety of methods, but we're going to get there. We're getting ahead of ourselves. So here we go. Healthy educational principles. Someone said I should cancel that order of Brave Writer posters I was going to sell. You're adorable. That made my day. Okay. So 3 principles for a healthy education. Okay? So first of all, look for sources of inspiration, right? We've talked about that already. Surprise, inspiration. If it comes from the astronomy observatory where passionate old men are helping your child look through the lens of a telescope at the sky, yes. If it comes from doing the Suzuki version of learning violin, fabulous. If you're getting it by reading Charlotte Mason's homeschooling series, go for it. If the 4-year cycle of ancient history through modern history works for your family, right on. Be inspired. Your best educational life happens when you are following your hunch that this thing captured my imagination. Okay? And that can even happen with unschooling. You might find that you need a season where you just let it all go and you let yourself discover the curiosities of your child. So, as I like to say, inspiration is not a lengthy visitor. And if you ignore her when she shows up, she stops coming. So when you feel inspired, remember last week? Chase life. Go for it. Let her guide you. Okay? So that's the first one. Second, you need handholds. It's almost impossible to follow inspiration and then not know what to do. If you are suddenly inspired, for example, to examine art, is the best way to learn about art to just go to the museum? I mean, it might be a starting point, but at some point it's helpful to have somebody tell you a little bit about art appreciation, to actually know what you're looking at and why you're there. And you get to do that. You get to find handholds. And some of those handholds are pieces of curriculum. I had someone email me today. Her name is Brett, and she gave me several links to a way to understand the etymology of language to help with spelling. And these are all people working as academics in the field of language. Should we discount them just because they're PhDs and they've written curriculum? No. Read them. Get to know them. See if some of their ideas work for you. Remember last time I said you're in charge of your curriculum, it's not in charge of you? That's the spirit. That's the spirit. Yes, find handholds, people, curricula, make use of co-ops, public school part-time enrollment, the junior college system for your high schoolers. There's nothing wrong with getting around experts and gathering to you inspiration through other people. Okay, third one, ready? So we have inspiration, handholds, the what to do, coming from people who know what they're doing. And then lastly, we need tools or models of implementation. It's no good. Here, I'll do it again in case you're screenshotting. I saw someone take a screenshot. Okay, you got it? So here's the thing. Not only do you need the philosophy, but you also need someone to help you know what it is you're learning about. And then lastly, you need tools, something to do, a practice, because without it, your days feel lifeless. I think what I was afraid of in unschooling was somehow introducing anything that might be considered curricula, and then we had nothing to do all day. And it's when I realized that I couldn't, on my own, conjure up all the great ideas for exploring nature, looking at art. I was pretty good with writing because, why? Expert, immersed. Math, history, science. These things didn't come to me naturally. I did have to do some research. I did have to plan some things. It was important to provide activities for my kids. And yes, there are some powerful books and blogs and ideas that come through a non-traditional academic context. But I wasn't prepared to discount academic sources. I had benefited in grad school. I had seen it happen. So what we do in Brave Writer is we suggest this idea of routine, where you have some comforting processes you return to on a daily basis that you always know are going to be there for you. You can spice them up with a little imagination and, enchanted pixie dust from time to time. But in between flights of imagination and inspiration, it feels good to know what you're doing. It just does. Yes, like tea time. Exactly. So let me just show you those 3 principles again, and then I have one more thing and we'll be just about done. So inspiration, handholds, the what to do, and then tools or models for implementation. Okay? Related to the specifics. Don't try to copy someone's whole life. Get one thing from someone. So you've got this friend and she's really good at, this really relaxed schooly thing, and you're not really a relaxed schooly person. But maybe she's great at her art table. Copy that. You don't have to take it all. Copy the part that you value in your friends. Don't try and reproduce their lives in your home. Okay, so here's my last thing. So I was talking about this unschooling dilemma when I was in it with some of my closest homeschooling mom friends. And one of them, whose kids were just a little older than me, she said, which I thought was so, here I'm grabbing my card, but getting ready. She said something that just shocked me. She said, we did unschooling 1 year, and then a couple years later we did it another year. She goes, I think you should try all educational philosophies because variety is the spice of life. And I thought, what? I was told that there's no way you could unschool for a year. Like, that isn't allowed. You have to commit. You have to, sign with your blood for the rest of your life. That's what I thought. And then I started thinking about my life. And you know what? My life is really a variety of educational inputs. My places that I've lived, how we redo our kitchens or our family rooms, all the various things I've been interested in have been varied. Why would my homeschool be any different? And it gave me so much permission. I just thought, we can try it. We can adopt a little unschooliness. We can do a little classical. We can go over here to Sunlight and just use historical fiction. But then we can go over here to Charlotte Mason for art appreciation. Suddenly I was like, I can enjoy homeschooling. It was such a shock. And so that's where I want to leave you today. There is value in so many philosophies, but see it like a treasure hunt. Remember last time we did the curriculum treasure hunt? This is the key. The secret map is this. There isn't just one pot of gold at the end of the hunt. There are little secrets all along the way at each point of the destination. And the actual joy of your homeschool is the collection, the risk, the adventure, the trying something and it not working, and then finding what works around the corner. That's what it looks like. That's the mature end result of homeschool. And this is what all of my peers will tell you. I hang out with veteran homeschoolers whose kids are grown, and this is what we've all realized. There isn't just one way. There are as many ways as families, There are as many philosophies as there are educational specialists. A brave schooler. Exactly. Exactly. Be brave. Exactly. This is why we call this Brave Scopes. You know what? Can I just pause for a minute? I feel so relieved. This was hard. I've put it off for a while, and I do not want to be seen as bashing any philosophy, because I can't tell you how much I've grown through my home education odyssey and through the amazing contributions even of people who were hard on me. I grew, and I would never rob you of that journey or that opportunity. All I want to be for you is a cheerleader. My favorite thing that I sign almost every email with is keep going. Keep going. Comes from the Gospel of Thomas. He says, keep going. That's what I want to say to you. Keep going. Don't feel discouraged. Allow yourself to be taught by a variety of people. I will never criticize you for doing that. And it's okay with me if you disagree or you find something I say suspect. All that tells me is that you're a critical thinker, because clearly, out of the sea of things I've said over the last 3 weeks, there's got to be something I've said that's wrong. So if you spot it, you better email me so I can grow too. Okay? Oh my God, I'm like crying. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. So I want to close with a couple of things. First of all, we're having a retreat next summer in Cincinnati, and there will be 125 spaces. And I hope some of you will be there. And what we're going to do is just create this amazing context for all of us to learn from each other. Someone asked me, if you're doing all these scopes, will you even have anything left to share? And I just want you to know that I'm always learning, so there's always more to talk about. And repetition is the key to growth. So even if you've heard it before, you may want to hear it again. But lastly, and the part you don't know, is we are going to have other members of the community speaking. I've already got a couple lined up who are going to rock your world. And we're going to actually do things, not just hear words about them. You'll get to draw, you'll get to experience nature and art, and all those things you want to include. We will be announcing prices, where to stay in a hotel, what your family members can do in Cincinnati while you're off having the Be Good to You retreat experience, all by the end of November. We're building the website page right now. So I hope you'll come. Where you can learn more about everything is bravewriter.com. Okay, that's where you can learn about my work. And if you want the free PDF of Free Writing Frenzy, sign up for my email list. If you want coaching and community support that is emotionally safe for risk-taking, come join our Homeschool Alliance at CoachJulieBogart.com. I love this space. We do this kind of work, but we dive deep, and I'm there and I talk with you, and I promise I never tell you what to do. Ever. I help you figure out what you want to do. And the community does it for each other, and I'm just like, I'm floored. I'm literally floored. This has been the secret desire of my heart since I was in homeschooling. And I can't believe that it actually is happening, and that the love and the growth is so powerful there. So if you want to come, check out CoachJulieBogart.com. Okay, last thing, you guys. I want to get off. We are doing a challenge. I want you this week to do an enchanted scope with this hashtag, so it'll show up on Twitter. We've already had some from our community. Show me the ways that you're sprinkling pixie dust on your homeschool, okay? And let's share it with the community and inspire each other. Tomorrow, I'll do a quick scope. I don't know what time, but you'll be able to see it within 24 hours of the broadcast on how to Periscope. So if you're new, I'll teach you how so you can participate in our Enchanted Scopes Challenge. Oh my God, everybody, let's all breathe. That felt really good, risky, but okay. And I love you guys. Thank you so much for being such a supportive community to each other. And we will do this again on Monday for sure. Not sure our topic. I will do party school at some point next week. Okay? All right, you guys. Love you. So I like to sign off by saying, live bravely, live honestly, write bravely. Thank you so much.